It's how much talking goes on during a sitting. The sittings that I do, and I really don't know what happens with other people, is that there's about an hour, and then a break, and then another hour. And with Frank, there's loads of chat during the first hour, and I think that's true with all of the sitters, because apart from the recent breaks with the lockdowns, it's the sitters who bring the world to Frank, and he sort of wants to know what's going on. They come from very different worlds. And then in the second half, it gets very quiet, and that's, I feel, when the work is being really done. The first half is sort of prep. Thank you.
Can I reverse the question that you asked your father? I'm saying, is there an unease of talking to you? Was there an unease of questioning him?
No. I mean, we I think it's true to say, have a fairly rough and tumble verbal relationship. There are some points that we both know we disagree on profoundly, and we seem to return to those pretty regularly. We do a lot of talking. Since COVID started, we've been sort of talking more because I speak to him every day on the telephone. And there's always something. There's always some point he wants to make, something he wants to prove. So, no, I think I'm utterly comfortable talking to him. Yeah, it was fine. And he's sort of comfortable talking to me, and I don't think he held anything back in this, but of course I'll never know.
Can I ask, is he still working in acrylics and drawings too? Is he working in both mediums?
The acrylic is just in one place. My father works in two places. And the original studio, he still works in oils. And the acrylics are in the other studio, which is in the same house where my mother lives. And he uses acrylics there. Initially he started using acrylics because there was a term in the lease that nothing flammable can be used on the property. And he took this so seriously that he stopped using oil paints and used acrylics instead.
Because he mentioned it was his last oil painting, but you're saying he still works in oils.
Well, it was his last oil painting of my mother, and he works for my mother in the studio, which is in the same house that my mother lives.
Right.
So he still works in oils.
He mentions the sculpture and his relationship to sculpture, why he should make it or not. But was there ever a relationship between himself and, say, Giacometti? Did he ever talk about that? You know, the way Giacometti takes away the material, puts it back on, and also the drawings by rubbing them out and putting them on top.
Not really. He admires Giacometti. He admires most sculptors. What he said to me is, he says, you know, the painting just painting just has to work from one angle, whereas a sculpture has to work 360 degrees all the way around.
And it might be moved somewhere else.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he regards it as an impossibility. I don't think he has a
process of taking away and putting back on. Did you think that he felt that was
if he has thought about it, he's not spoken about it with me. I know that he met Giacometti in a pub in Soho, but as far as the relationship is concerned, I think the only bit I can remember of the conversation is I think my father asked him what he thought about Picasso's work, and I think Giacometti said, "Oh, a cartoonist."
Your father doesn't sign his work on the whole. I noticed in one of the portraits, I think it was the one of David Landau, he's written David in the top right-hand corner. Would there be a reason for that?
Yeah, as far as writing things on pictures, I think he says actually that it's always for the sake of the painting, that the painting in some way didn't work without it. I mean, sometimes he's written my name across the bottom, and sometimes he's written his own name across the bottom of drawings of me, I think. And there's, in fact, the paintings in Colin Wiggins' film, which is part of this exhibition, where he's got Belshazzar's Feast, and he's translated that into the writing on the wall, literally. So I think it's always, as far as he's concerned, it's always there for structural reasons, compositional reasons, rather than because of what it says so much.
Painting is a very visual, spatial language, and obviously feel that. I wondered what he feels about the contemporary art world. That's a very broad question, I suppose, and if there's much in it that he finds you can take seriously, or...
Well, it's very difficult to say. I mean, my father, I say at the beginning of the film that his reputation of being a hermit has not always been entirely accurate, but these days it absolutely is. I mean, he goes nowhere. He sees nothing. So, there's some marvellous exhibitions on at the moment in London, including a very good exhibition of Sickert paintings, and he absolutely loves Sickert.
Yeah.
He hasn't seen it, he won't see it. So he doesn't, he'll see things in newspapers and in reproduction, but who can judge from a reproduction? So he's not really in the best position to
Does he
judge.
feel a general trend of where the art world has moved, maybe sometimes talking about ideas more than that visual language I was suggesting?
Yeah, I don't know. I can never speak on his behalf, but I would suggest that he's totally uninterested in that. I think he feels comfortable in British art history, and I think maybe he feels comfortable in British art history because it's a little less theoretical maybe than some other countries where things are, it's tended to be obviously individual geniuses or individual people who are enormously driven who have produced the work that we now regard as British art history.
I just found myself thinking, that's really a question, but he always works from observation. He may have his drawings around, but he's always working directly from Britain, which is...
Yes, I can't think of an exception to that rule.
No.
Obviously, I seem to be mentioning lockdown a lot. It was difficult during lockdown because, as I say, the world has come to my father through the sitters into the studio, and there were no sitters. And so he started doing something, despite him saying in the film 7 years ago that he wasn't going to do any more self-portraits. In the first year of lockdown, he did 19 self-portraits. Obviously, the sitter is always available, but also I think he became interested in his own head again. And he started getting sitters back now, and I've offered to sit for him, and he's not taken me up on the offer yet. I think maybe because he's trying to protect my time a bit, but also I think he's leaving a bit of time for the self-portraits, which he continues to do. So I don't know if that's got anything to do with what you said, but yes, I can't think of an exception.
Sorry, another question. But sometimes I sense some anguish in your father's work, in the sort of repeating and trying to find truth. And I wondered if you feel that he's fulfilled in what he does.
That can be tricky. I think, I don't think he's satisfied. I think he keeps on working like most of us do because we're not satisfied with what we've done already. But I think as far as how he lives his life, I think he's very happy. I think a few years ago, he was saying, it'd be nice to do this, it'd be nice to do that, there was something in Venice, it'd be nice to do that. He said, but I prefer to be painting. He said, and why wouldn't I? It's the best game I've ever played. So I think although it can seem a bit serious, And it is serious. It's also fun. It's that sort of Noel Coward thing. Work is fun.
Do you see any parallels between your filmmaking and his painting? And do you ever sort of compare and contrast the different art forms when you're
I don't see any similarity between my films and his artwork. And although he's...
I mean the act of making a film and observing the world and...
I think there's a bit of a difference and there's a bit of a similarity. I don't seem to be able to give a straight answer to anything. I think I like to think, although I've made a number of art films, I have made other things as well, but a number of art films, that they are portraits. They're people films rather than art films.
Yeah.
And so it feels, when I'm making a film about someone specific, be they dead or alive, I feel as I'm trying to make a portrait while sharing an enthusiasm. But I think it's totally different from what he does, because it's essential to engage with the world rather than just view it. To make a film, it is, even the way I do it, which is very individual compared to others, it needs to be a collaborative process.
I see. But wouldn't he view what he does as a collaborative?
He would absolutely, on a one-to-one basis, collaborative, but I mean outside that relationship. So I need to have relationships with a lot of different people and work with a lot of different people, because I'm not a technician. So I need people's help.
Yeah.
So it's a bit more democratic. Maybe not. Yes, I'm a megalomaniac, so there's a lot of people involved who I like to feel as though they're involved in the creation of the thing, but I hope I'm still sort of steering the ship.
Thank you. I really enjoyed the film, and a great window into your world and his world, your father's world. There's a lot on your father and his sitter, but there's another dimension. There's a huge following of artists who want to be like your father, want to paint like your father. Do they have to follow from afar, or is there time in his day or in his week or in his month where he speaks with other artists about?
Absolutely not. No, I mean, he used to do other things. He used to, if he was maybe a bit stuck or had a break in the afternoon, maybe go and see a film, any film, just whatever film was on. He would sometimes go to the theatre. He loves the theatre. He did some acting when he was very young. He reads a lot still. He would see friends. Many of his friends were artists, but the idea of and he will respond to letters. He can respond to letters from people who write in and ask questions if the mood takes him. But the idea of sitting down with someone and chatting over what he does, no, he doesn't have the time or the energy, and I would guess the inclination to do that.
I was interested in seeing the film and talking, if your father's interacting with sitters and places and the feeling, how that evolves and how he creates it's a representation of something that he's interacting with. I was just linking it with the exhibition here. He's obviously spent a lot of time looking at the work of other painters, and to an extent that's a static image. So do you think he sees that as sort of an academic sort of compositional process, or is he actually interacting with the sort of visual language of the original painter?
Lucian Freud, the National, I don't know if you know, the National Gallery maybe still have a system where certain people, certain painters generally, get a special pass. It's like a magic ticket, and you can go in almost at any time of the day or night. So you can go in at 7 o'clock in the morning, you can go in at 6 o'clock in the morning, they'll let you in the side entrance, and you can go and work from whatever paintings are in there. I remember Lucian Freud saying that he didn't go there to look at pictures. He visited the National Gallery like he would visit the doctor. If he was stuck or something, he would go and look at these paintings as if they were medicine, sort of thing. And I think my father very much used it in the same way. It was a way of unblocking, and also sort of, you know, keeping the level, the aim high, maybe. But just in terms of them being sort of different from maybe the landscapes or the people, I think the pictures of the pictures are sort of portraits of the pictures, because they're not, no one would necessarily glance at one of the drawings and say, oh yeah, the Fighting Tenere. And so I think I was really struck by I think it's 4 hay wings possibly downstairs next to the constable. And what they are is they're all a hay wing, but they're all utterly different hay wings. And they are hay wings on different days. I mean, there's this thing of, you know, doing the portrait, what you see in the end is the result of a different painting for every sitting. And it gets scraped down after every time. It's not as if it's built on it. But obviously there's a ghost of the image and there's a ghost of the memory of that image. But it is interesting to see those 4 next to each other, which are, you know, the Hayway maybe 2 weeks apart for him. There's, I think it's a portrait, a drawing of Ron Kittai's wife, Sandra Fisher, and I think Ron went and picked up Sandra after every sitting and took a photograph of the drawing at the end of that sitting. And I think you can see that, and it's possibly 60 images, and you can just see how the thing progresses. And that's right, I wouldn't say it was like a flip book, but it's, you know, it does give some insight into how much they change, and then rather surprisingly how they finish. Maybe surprisingly how they finish.
How do you find those out of interest?
I would just look up Portrait of Sandra Fisher.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. It might be in the film I produced called To the Studios, or some of them might be.
It might be among the catalogues in the Royal Academy catalogue, possibly.
Trust James.
Might be.
Okay.
I've often I've wondered, Lucian Freudian, that your father had quite a close relationship with
Yes.
him, met and talked.
They were very good friends.
Yeah. And I've always had this thought that maybe when Freud changed from his earlier style, which was very graphic and I don't know what words to use to describe it really, and Kenneth Clark was furious with him for changing, but he's got much more physical these days, and I've often wondered whether your father rubbed off on you or something.
I think that's very unlikely. I think I would say, this is not my father talking, this is me talking, I would say the fact that their work was so different allowed them to be so close. I think it would have been very difficult to maintain such a, I mean, I make it sound as though they met each other, you know, once a week. It certainly wasn't like that. We were both busy people. But it was a close relationship. And I think the fact that they did produce very different sorts of work maybe made that possible.
Having just said that, what about the relationship of your father and the apostle? Some might say there are similarities in the way they
Yes, I mean, I think they were together very young, and they were cheek by jowl, you know, as they described in the film, you know, when they had no other sitters, they were painting each other. But then when they could work without teaching, or they could paint without teaching, I think, although the friendship remained, there wasn't, you know, they weren't sort of meeting all the time, and there wasn't that sort of interchange of ideas so much. I think, although they both are seen to grow from the same Bomberg tree, which I'm not sure how much water that particular idea holds, I think their work is very different. Yeah, I don't know. It's in the eye of the beholder.
studio cover or some other kinds. And the wine scales and obviously works in that period, especially COVID.
No, he doesn't. Short answer, no, he doesn't. Some people might say he should.
I can't imagine him on his iPad ordering.
No, he's not. I mean, no telephone.
Jake, could you repeat what the question was?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Couldn't hear it.
I'm sorry. Yes, the question was, does he have a studio helper? And does he, order his own paint, organise his own life, and so on? It's a good question. No, he doesn't have a helper. He has someone who he's worked with for very many years, who is sort of his agent, his representative, maybe. And he is, he's also a friend, but he's also very helpful. In terms of paint supplies, all the supplies, my father does that himself. Complains bitterly when he has to phone people up because the delivery hasn't arrived. He thinks he's being personally targeted by companies because he has to wait 10 minutes for them to pick up the phone. He's not very worldly, but he says he's completely incapable in the film. I would say that what he's done is he's removed everything that's not necessary to painting from his life. Doesn't have a credit card, doesn't have a telephone, doesn't have a computer, certainly doesn't have an email address. So what there's him, the occasional taxi, and a telephone he can use at one of the studios. So that's all he needs, so he doesn't have anything else.
Does he feed himself?
Yes, he does. He used to be a fantastically good cook. Does he feed himself was the question. He's certainly made the best...
Not the literal sense, but filling the fridge.
Yeah, no. I mean, the best potato soup I've ever eaten was made by my father. And he's the sort of person, he's not one of those people who cooks from a recipe book, or at least wasn't. He was one of those people who sort of imagine dishes in the middle of the night and then put them together the following day. So, yes, they're very good cooks. But most painters are good cooks because they spend a long, long time having to feed themselves with very little money. I mean, very few of them are as good as you and Hugo, who was fantastic. I mean, just fantastic. But most of them can cook. Lucien would sort of only cook game, but was terrific at it. Lucien had a problem with his, this is really going off the point, had a problem with his elbow, and it was sort of affecting his painting. And one of his daughters said that he should try combining his food, and that helped for some muscular. And so rather than having carbohydrates at one point, then leaving it 4 hours and then having proteins and other, Lucien then just ate nothing but protein for the rest of his life. And that tended to be partridge.
Did it help the elbow?
It did help the elbow.
Does he still paint every day? He's 90. Does he still paint every day?
Oh yes, he does. He does. I mean, it's the reason for everything. It is the most important thing. Sorry, does he paint every day? I keep on forgetting. Yes, that was just observing that there was a good supply of oil paint from a company called Stokes in Sheffield, where I come from. I'm not even sure that they still exist, they were taken over. There's a lot of round stuff now, it's basically around round deliveries. Okay, I think this might be the last question, is it? I think, no, it's fine.
I hope it's not too personal. When you were a young boy,
Yeah.
what sort of a father was he in terms of wanting to show the world in a particular way to a young boy who's growing up into the world?
Yeah, well, we didn't have that. I didn't.
So I'm not sure what age you were when.
Yeah, no. I wasn't complaining. No, I didn't see my father between the age of 5 and 17. So it's. I was sort of barely formed when I stopped seeing him, and I was pretty formed by the time I started seeing him again. So it's that bit in the middle. Sort of didn't happen.
Thank you very much indeed. It was an absolutely fascinating conversation.